Let's take a look at some charts on Dash from this week's article on Brave New Coin. So as always, I like to compare the consensus mechanisms or use cases together with all the other coins. People will argue that Dash isn't a proof of stake coin. Look, I don't really care, okay? It uses a staking mechanism, and that's fundamentally what's all that's important when you're comparing these, because it deals with the supply all the same, in that supply is being locked into interest or yield earning devices, okay? So Dash in the orange here, it's kind of in the middle of the road of everything. It's definitely one of the older coins. I haven't actually heard too much about it recently. Maybe it's just not on my radar, but I've heard a lot more news like about ADA-tron, XTZ, ZRX than most of this other stuff. You know, Lisk, Waves, the Cred, NEM has a new like 2.0 thing coming. Neo to me is just dead. I've heard nothing about it anywhere over the past 6 to 12 months. But Dash is kind of in that bucket of older coin, kind of needs a facelift in order for people to get involved, I think. The Google trends, though, which I'll show later, actually look pretty favorable for an uptrend here for Dash. So maybe it's just a US thing or a crypto Twitter thing where I'm just not plugged into people talking about Dash, but I just haven't heard anybody haven't heard or seen anything regarding Dash lately. But yeah, it's in the middle of the road for everything, which is fine. It's got pretty high daily active addresses, which is probably due to its on-chain mixing capabilities, private send, and other sort of activities I'll show later on. But it doesn't really stick out as a strong contender against any other staking coin. Like, people aren't going to look at this pile of stuff and say, Dash is the one when you compare everything. It's just not the case. Looking at Dash's inflation, it's still around 6%, which is pretty high, really. You know, if your competition like BTC is below 2% inflation, I think anybody realistically investing long-term is going to look at that just based on supply-demand and say, okay, Dash has a ways to go to get there, right? To get to 6%. You can see it just had its reduction not too long ago. I forget the exact, this isn't a halving, I don't think, but the inflation continues to reduce over time. So it's got a ways to go in that regard. If we look at the hash rate difficulty for Dash, though, this has just continued to skyrocket. It's been pretty volatile, you know, post-January this year, but there could be some covert ASIC mining going on. If we look at the list of all the ASICs, there's no new ASIC that is being released this year, you know, beyond November 2020. So it kind of makes you wonder, you know, what's really going on here, because this list hasn't changed in a long time. Not only that, but most of these aren't profitable. It's like 11 of the 24 are profitable. So it's hard to really know what's going on there. But because the mining profitability hasn't changed that much either, price is up a little bit, but there's probably an ASIC that hasn't been announced yet that's being used to mine the network. And if we look at the number of masternodes, so Dash is a hybrid proof of work and proof of stake alike coin. I haven't actually gotten an update on this number for a few months because the site I use for this is down. So my guess is it's not much greater than 4,600 masternodes. But again, if we're talking supply demand, from 2015 to Jan 2019, supply continued to get sucked up into these masternodes, and then it just went flat and is declining earlier this year, late last year. So it's never good for price, because if your masternodes are going down, that means people are selling them most likely. If they're selling the masternodes, then that's going to damper any bull runs, bull rallies, that sort of thing, because it's increased selling pressure. If you look at the private sends per day, they're up slightly since 2015. You know, it's not like a ton of people are using private send on Dash, but it's increasing month over month, certainly. If you look at mixing popped up quite a bit in 2019, and it's kind of just ranged here. Not too many people using it, more so than they were last year. Dash also has a governance component, which most hybrid proof of work, proof of stake coins do. Most of them have proof of stake reward, proof of work reward, and then a treasury reward from the block reward that all gets distributed out. I actually don't think this method is too terrible because it ensures governance, or in this case, marketing long term. I think the issue though is too much of the treasury is used for marketing rather than paying developers, that sort of thing. But if you're not a coin that's in public conversation frequently, you're going to need some sort of marketing to show what's going on with the coin, or just, business development type stuff, just outreach for involvement, because it's not going to be on a billboard somewhere, or they're not going to be talking about it on CNBC, or, it's going to be sort of hidden in the background. If we look at the transactions and average transaction size for Dash, the line is the transaction count, and it's certainly up over the past 2.5 years. Not dramatically so, but it's increasing, so that's not bearish, certainly. If we look at these spikes, you can see that they're just like stress tests, or not necessarily organic activity. Mean transaction size is kind of down and flat over the past 2.5 years. So nothing particularly bullish there, but if price pops up, this will pop up with it as well. If you look at active addresses, they've continued to increase, kind of mirroring the mixing chart, if I can find it again. So to me, most of the active addresses are actually mixing related and not necessarily anything else. So that's just to consider when you're looking at any chain as far as on-chain stuff, what is the chain capability? Because if the chain is able to mix transactions, then this number is going to be inflated a little bit. It's not going to necessarily represent an individual person changing their address up or down in value. It's going to represent just capabilities of the chain. NVT has continued to decline over the past 4 years, kind of on this downward trend. It's going up recently, but that's certainly bullish in a vacuum. But you also have to take in the mixing stuff. That's going to lower NVT because it measures on-chain activity versus market cap. So it kind of says that Dash is underpriced based on its market cap over the past few years, but at the same time, it hasn't been able to hold an NVT below 100, just relatively. That's what it looks like as an important level for a bull market. Looking at MVRV, which is another market cap versus realized cap, which is on-chain activity. In the fill here, MVRV is historically at a low point. When MVRV is high, that's a general sell signal, local top, just says the market cap is overvalued. So in a vacuum, this looks good for a bull run. I just don't know. Again, this is probably falsely down. It looks bullish because of the on-chain activity, which is mixing. So it's hard to really justify like the value here, taking it seriously, because there's just too much ancillary stuff involved. It's not pure. It's not a Bitcoin pure test, right? Like with Bitcoin, you can look at the MVRV. There's not much else going on with Bitcoin on the chain other than people moving it around individually or just buying and selling, exchanges, that sort of thing. It's not like coin mixing, right? Really no reason that Bitcoin's MVRV would look like this if it wasn't bullish. And this is a Google trend, so you can see they're certainly, they're low, 2-year lows basically, but they're perking up a little bit. So maybe Dash has a chance here as people find out more about it. Looking at some technicals, yearly pivots, VPVR, RSI, 50, 200 EMA. So the 50 and the 200 are crossing bullish for the first time since earlier this year, which should tell anyone that this is projecting a move higher. I like this $100, $150 level. Consolidating somewhere in here, bouncing between these two, looks fine to me. I think 200 is a bit of a ways off. It would take like people just FOMOing into Masternodes, I think, for that to happen. No bull or bear div on RSI here. So this is like neutral to ranging bullish territory. Not super exciting. The other thing here is there's this Adam Eve situation where that could also propel this to 150 if that breaks up. This is the cloud, which also shows on trend. It looks bullish. It's above the cloud. The TK lines are bullish. The cloud is bullish. So the medium to long-term trend here is bullish. I'd expect something more like March to June, July move than a 2020 move where it was straight up, sideways, straight down. That's just brutal. I expect this to be a sort of a multi-week trend if it's going to materialize, but it does look pretty good for up. Dash BTC also looks like it actually wants to reverse to the other edge of the cloud here through this edge-to-edge move. And what I said in the article is it took Dash 2 years, 2.5 years to consolidate through this zone. You can see this massive VPVR resistance here. So it's hard to get ultra bullish on price where it's at, considering it took 2 years to consolidate prior. The mean reversion play looks fine. This Adam and Eve play again looks fine over time, but unless it's above 0.17, really it doesn't look like a great risk reward play for me. But it could also just create another ascending triangle where you get this Adam and Eve situation or Eve Adam situation, and then it just makes another low, makes another higher low, and then does something. So this could have 18 months left, right? Like, you don't know. As long as it's above 0.7, it has a shot for higher. But right now where it sits, it's probably just going to continue consolidating. So the fundamentals look okay to iffy. Technicals look decent to mean reversion-y. BUSD pair looks pretty good. The BTC pair just doesn't look exciting to me at all. And I think Dash just needs something. It needs some PR or something. I'm not a big fan of the project just outright, but in order for people to get involved, it's going to need some news, some DeFi news or something to get some headlines rolling here for Dash.